so much. Once again, let me welcome all of us to this all-important program. I had done that earlier. Again, I'm seeing most of my leaders here for the first time this year, 2024. So let me say Happy New Year to all of our leaders here present. Thank you once again for showing up this year. I pray that this year indeed becomes new for us as individuals and for the chamber as well as the nation Nigeria. We are here this morning with the intention of having this 2024 economic outlook and budget analysis. And right so we'll have our leaders here present, but just before I do the introductions, we will be doing well to be upstanding as we take our national anthem. Please, let's be upstanding for national anthem. Thank you so much. Please do have your seat. Without much ado, let me recognize the presence of our leaders that are here present today, beginning from the president of the chamber, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, FCA, President SCCI. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President. We also have Vice President here at SCCI, Sir Ladi Smith, FCA. Thank you so much. We have with us also our leader, one of our honorary Vice President, Mr. Olumide Adekunle. Thank you so much, sir. We have with us also one of our past presidents, Honorable Mrs. Tokima Bogunje. Please let's put our hands together for. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. We have our father also with us, Dr. Abraham Aderemi Halo, FCIB, honorary live head at our SCCI. Our father is always with us all the way. We have also ESCO members here present and most of our council members. You are highly recognized. Thank you so much for showing up. We also have with us this morning our guest speaker. Let me recognize him. I saw him last December 31st when we met at the Channels TV when our president was there. Mr. Bismarck Rewani, Chief Executive Officer here, Financial Derivatives. Thank you so much, sir. He's our guest speaker today. We also have with us, if I don't recognize him, I don't want to be called from the presidency. I'm tempted to call him doctor, but he has not told me he has done his PhD. So I will refer to him as Mr. Ben, Pastor Ben Akabese, DG Budget Office. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for coming up. You were here with us last year virtually, but we thank you. You are here today presently. My brother and my leader, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Let's put our hands together for him. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for showing up, sir. He's one of the leading examples, young men that we have in this country doing us well. Thank you so much. I also would like to recognize today the presence of the Director General of SCCI, Dr. Mrs. Chinyere Almuna, FCA. Yes, I saw her in the house the other time. Thank you so much. Without wasting much of your time, just to announce that we have some of our participants online. As at the last count, we're about 150 participants online already. We will be having some of them speak to us during the question and answer later. Just to quickly move, we have the president of the chamber address us in his welcome address. Let's put our hands together for the president, Mr. Gabriel Idausa, FCA.
Our vice presidents who are present here, revered past presidents, live vice presidents who are present here, ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pleasure that I welcome you all to the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry Economic Outlook for this year. Let me especially welcome our sponsor, Linkers Assurance, for the event. The Outlook and Budget Analysis and annual event designed to review key policy developments and macroeconomic performance in the previous year and discuss the outlook for the year ahead, focusing on risks and opportunities. The Nigerian economy in 2023 has proven to be surprisingly resilient amid multiple shocks arising from significant inflationary pressures, consistent currency depreciation, decelerated economic growth, monetary tightening, debt sustainability challenges, declining real income, and high unemployment and poverty levels. Policy reforms by the government in 2023, particularly the removal of fuel subsidies and the floating of the exchange rate, are expected to boost fiscal revenue and contribute moderately to the improvement of the country's growth prospects in 2024. The World Bank, in its 2024 Global Economic Prospects, improved its growth projection for Nigeria from 3.3 to 3.7, respectively. Similarly, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, in its World Economic Situation and Prospects 2024, projects that we will grow by 3.1% in 2024 and 2025. With inflation expected to gradually ease as the effects of last year's exchange rate reforms and removal of fuel subsidy fade. However, the downside risks to growth prospects include the rising cost of living that we are struggling with, weak business environment, the poor manufacturing performance, and rising unemployment. Today, we will discuss these emerging economic issues and implications for business and households and their impacts on the country's outlook. The outcome of this session will be documented and shared with critical stakeholders to present our views and concerns about policy issues and developments. Once again, I would like to thank our keynote speakers and panelists who are all here and have earlier been identified for honoring our invitation. I want to give as much time as possible for these interventions and much more importantly, the period of conversations amongst us in the audience, because it is during this period that we really get the substance of this event. So on this note, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you very much.
Please join me to put your hands together for Mr. President for that welcome address. Very brief and direct to the point. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. President. We'll want to say that we have now over 200 plus participants online. I think that is where the world is going. People want to stay at the comfort of their homes and benefit from what is on everywhere. Thank you so much for our participants online. We have over 200 plus with us online. While the president was having his welcome address, we had join us Ms. Chinwe Igwin, Chief Economist, Coronation Merchant Bank, joined us. Let's put our hands together for Chinwe. Please, let's put our hands together for Chinwe, please. You know, I know her, she doesn't want that, but we just have to do what we need to do. We also have with us online the Honorable Commissioner for Commerce, Cooperative Trade and Investment here in Lagos State, Mrs. Folashade Ambrose Madebem. Let's put our hands together for Mrs. Folashade. She's joining us online. All right. We also like to take the first goodwill message from the Honorable Commissioner for Trade, Commerce, Cooperative here in Lagos State, Mrs. Folashade Ambrose Medebem. Please, can we have Mrs. Folashade come up? Honorable Commissioner, ma'am. She's not there. All right, thank you so much. While we await the Honorable Commissioner to join for our session, we'll move to the next on the item. We are moving a bit very fast. We are doing well with our time. You like to listen to him. I love to listen to him always. His perspective and insight on all issues regarding economy in Nigeria is, even across the globe, very superb. Put your hands together to welcome Mr. Bismarck Rewani, CEO of Financial Derivative Company, as he makes his presentation.
Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed honored to be here today to share our perspectives on the year 2024 that has just started. And I think it's also auspicious that we have the Mr. Budget himself here with us. And so the topic today is about building economic resilience in 2024, strategies for a sustainable future. There's what you call the Economic Resilience Index. Okay. So today we're going to talk about concept definition, the Nigerian economy snapshot analysis, and can you go back to the outline? Budget as a tool of economic management, then summary and conclusion. But let me start off by saying that there are three types of budget: balanced budget, deficit budget, and surplus budget, depending on how the state of the economy is. And typically, because we are facing a slowdown and the shocks, a deficit budget becomes the norm at this time. And we've had this for some time. But it's not just the deficit that matters, but what you use it to accomplish in terms of macroeconomic stability, growth, inflation management, and all of that. So today, we go to the next slide where we have the resilience index. And the resilience index is a combination of social stability, good governance, and macroeconomic stability. Those three give you the key features of resilience index. And if you look at the countries, the 10 most economically stable countries in the world. So you have Sweden. Yes. You need to put that in there. So you see that Sweden number 1, Finland, Denmark, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Ireland, Belgium, Estonia, and France. So if you rank them on number 1 is Switzerland, number 2 Norway, and it goes all the way down. Nigeria is number 162 out of 190 countries, right? But one thing I would like to point out here is that Switzerland, which is number 1, which has a score of 0.962, the reality is that there's also the independence and autonomy of certain institutions, policy making and regulatory institutions, from interference, and that gives you, there's that strong correlation between that and economic outcomes. Switzerland has the most independent and autonomous central bank in the world, right? And if you look at it, it goes all the way through, right? So, on the good governance, efficiency ranking, Estonia, Switzerland, Norway, all the way down. Well, you notice that there are hardly any African countries there. But having said that, let's go straight to the meat of the matter. This is Nigerian growth trajectory over the years and what it points to in the 2 years ahead. You'll find that 2015 down to 2016 there was the oil price shock, then COVID, then post-COVID, and now we are beginning to see 3.3 for 2024 and 3.9 for 2025. What is interesting here is that you are going to be having growth rates that are higher than your population growth rate. But the growth itself is a mixed bag. What type of growth you have, and whether it's going to generate employment, and whether it's going to reduce income inequality, and whether it's going to be constrained, whether we're going to optimize that. But before we go on, we should ask ourselves, what are the broad macroeconomic goals of this administration as announced? $1 trillion in 8 years from the current $400 billion. In other words, you need to grow at about 7 or 8% per annum for the next 5-6 years. But to do that, you have to say, where are we starting from? We are talking about 2.3 in 2023 to 3.3 in 2024. So where is the extra 5% going to come from, if at all it's going to come? So I think that's one thing we have to bear in mind. We avoided a recession in 2023, right? But as you can see, even the European Union and Germany in particular, has dipped into recession. So there's no hard and fast rule that you would avoid a recession, but we did. So some sectors will have performed the national average. You find that some sectors are growing infinitely higher than in the annual growth rate. Financial institutions, 29.66, telecommunications, 7.74, construction and civil works, 3.89. The bank exposure to these sectors, right, are relatively high. Financial institutions is between themselves, and telecommunications, 3, and construction, 10. Subsidy sensitivity. The financial institutions are relatively moderately sensitive, subsidy sensitive. Telecommunications, moderate, and construction, low. Now, contracting sectors, crude petroleum and natural gas, oil refining, textile and apparel. These sectors have been in recession. The oil and gas crude upstream has been in recession for a long time, growing at minus 13.3, 13.43, it was minus 13.8 and minus 4.21. You can see that across. So these sectors like crude are also having huge banking credit exposure, and that puts the whole idea of the financial system itself could be treacherously working on eggshells. So what are the challenges that we have? One, suboptimal growth and non-inclusive growth. That is, potential GDP is 4.9, while real GDP is 3.3. That means there's more to be done than you have, right? So if your son comes back and gets 85% in mathematics, and the teacher says this boy can get 90 or 95%, he's underperforming his own potential. That's what's happening, number one. Number two is inflation numbers came out yesterday, And if the official data is to be believed, it's about 29.87, right? Which means that inflation, that is a 27-year high, right? It means that a child who was born 27 years ago, right, that's 1996, 1997, was the time we had this inflation. And that's a long time ago, right? Another challenge is that income inequality. The Gini coefficient is showing that there's income inequality in Nigeria. But not only income inequality, there's opportunity inequality. And it has its geographical dimension, it has its political dimension, and other things. So it has to be addressed. Because even if you are having growth and there's income inequality, it leads to insecurity, which will destroy the growth potential. Fiscal imbalances in terms of its deficit and what the deficit is used to fund. And the high poverty and unemployment rate, poverty has become endemic, and we need to look at that. Then the Naira, external imbalances. The currency is structurally misaligned and also contemporaneously also limping along. So there are problems that, and these are the challenges, well documented. We don't have to go now, what do we do about them, which is the key issue. So inflation, 29%, but it's already getting to the point of inflection. In other words, it peaks at a particular level and then begins to drop. But to understand this, you must know why there's inflation and why it seems to be intractable. There are a couple of reasons. One, food inflation, which is tied to low productivity at agricultural level. There's logistics cost. Diesel was yesterday 1,030. We are told that it's going to begin to decline marginally. This week it should go down to 990. Not for any reason, and not because of the Dangote refinery which is going to produce, but just the dynamics of the market. So there's diesel. There's money supply growth, which is very interesting. The money supply growth numbers were released yesterday as of November and shows 36% growth in money supply, M3 broad money. So if your money supply grows at 36% and your GDP, which is goods and services, grows at 2.3%, you have to subtract one from the other. 36 minus 2 gives you 34%. That's your starting inflation block, right? Because the inflation is defined as too much money chasing too few goods. The goods being produced grew at 2.5%. The money being printed grew at 36%. That's starting. Then you add the shocks. You add exchange depreciation, which was 33%, right? And the pass-through effect. Not everything passes through, but it's something to consider. And so what do you do? And then another thing, the independence and autonomy of the central bank, we consider that work in progress. It's not, let's face it, it's not independent, but it's getting there, right? National savings ratio is 20% of GDP, and gross fixed investment is 25% of GDP. So if you increase savings, you probably will increase gross fixed investment, and output will follow because there'll be a multiplier effect. So these are the things that will happen as we go along. External sector vulnerability, external debt, contractual and non-contractual is about 100% of total exports. And the debt service ratio, right, depending on how you look at it, is going to be really excruciating for Nigeria. And we are in a period of higher interest rates, and some of us are optimistic and expectant that the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank are going to start reducing rates soon. But like we know, we are not sure that that's going to happen soon. So to that extent, even if it's going to happen, to that extent, we know that interest rates are going to be external interest rates. Nigeria just raised money from the Afrexim Bank at a rate of about 11.5% or something like that, and secured by oil production of about 90,000 barrels a day. So if secured with oil, you are paying 11% per annum. I can imagine what would have happened if it was not that adequately secured. So we are going to an era of higher interest rates effective interest rate for us borrowing. And if we are to fund our deficit, the ways to fund your deficit, either domestic borrowing, international borrowing, and a combination of all of the other possibilities. So the external debt service to export ratio also shows the external sector is vulnerable. But we also know that there's something else. What the external reserves of Nigeria, published as gross external reserves, moving average of 30 days. And the backlog of arrears and forward commitments comes to about $7 billion, we're told. So if in reality and truth we have $33 billion, all we need to do is write a check. But the last time I checked, writing a check without sufficient funds is a crime. So I would, I know with governance, Nigeria is not likely to write a check if the funds, if they're not backed by sufficient funds. So we have the reality of what we're running a deficit budget because that is what the economic necessity requires. Two, that the use of proceeds are going to be used partly for consumption and partly for capital projects. But capital projects are not necessarily funded from revenues. They are funded by project finance and some borrowings and investor things. So that is going to come. But all of these things depend on macroeconomic stability and the policy reform. Policy reform supported by institutional reform. Institutional reform supported by confidence. So, the Nigerian foreign exchange market is a perfect market. The last time I checked was single commodity, easy entry and exit, perfect information, and no limited barriers to entry. So if you subject the Nigerian foreign exchange market to these tests, you'll find that one, easy entry and exit is not, there are barriers there, and there are regulations. Perfect information, we just talked about reserves, so we really do not know how much is there. If you go into a Yoruba market now and you stop after the first store and you say, no, you cannot go for that, I want to know the price of tomatoes, then you are depending on somebody telling you what the price of tomatoes rather than you finding out. You are bound to have asymmetric information and an inefficient market. So if we can bring all of these factors into play, that is price discovery, reduce capital controls, and it will also reduce speculation and arbitrage opportunities. The efficient market will give us a price that is probably, in my judgment, going to be much better than what we have today. Yesterday, in the last 3 days, we saw that the primary market auction, we saw the rates for 90-day paper come down from 7% to 2%. We saw 180-day paper drop by almost 400 basis points. Almost instantaneously, the Naira fell sharply. The Naira fell, and it went from almost 1,200 to 1,215, then to 1,200. Yesterday it touched 1,300 before coming back to 1,290, 1,285. The second thing that happened was inflation numbers came out. But if inflation numbers are increasing and your interest rates are reducing, it means that your battle to curb inflation is bound to face major challenges and, in fact, bound to fail. So the markets are efficient and they are rational people. So they just said, okay, if these guys, when they wake up and will come back, but right now, I'm going short on the Naira. Then I don't have to be a prophet or whatever it is to know that by the end of today, it's going to cross 1,300. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't catch a falling knife. So that is clearly that. But that's not where it is. If you look at how it happened, on May 29, when the reforms were announced with all fanfare, look at the difference between the two rates. They merged. As a matter of fact, at one point, the parallel market was more attractive than the official market. That only happened many years ago, maybe 2008, right? So then, but the reforms meant one thing, a shift of resources from people to government. So the amount of money being shared by state governments and federal government went all the way to about 1.9 trillion. But that shift of resources means that it has to come back efficiently into the system. That's why we call it the circular flow of income and the national income identity equation. If there's any distortion in that, it will manifest itself in greater distortions. And so you see that by August, when they shared the fact, and a lot of governors and all of that headed straight to the BDCs, you could see immediately, you could see that, right? Then, at that, in June, early June, the price of diesel came down to 800 naira. The difference between the exchange rates, multiple exchange rates, narrowed. So markets expected continuation. But when the markets are extremely jittery, the markets are cowards. Once they see what they don't like, they take off. So, and that's what's happening. And it has gone all the way through. The NAFEM power gap was 4.75 naira. Today, that gap is 3.94 naira. So the numbers don't lie. So what is happening? Low interest rates, naira speculation, forex scarcity, and all of that leading to this outcome. But if you look at the true test of what the value of the naira is, when you take the goods, the basket in the United States, and divide it by the basket in Lagos. And that is showing us that the rate should be 853 naira. 853 naira. In fact, the NAFEM rate is 890. So the naira, to a large extent, is undervalued by 4%. But the markets do not care about this abstract concept. The markets want to know what is money and where is the value stored. And the first thing you ask yourself is that, what is the rate of interest for bonds or 10-year paper in the United States? 4%. What's the rate of inflation in the United States? 3.2. It went up to 3.4. What's the rate of interest? What's the inflation rate in Nigeria? For ease of argument, let's call it 30%. What is the 90-day treasury bill? 2%. So your currency can never appreciate against the currency if that level of distortion. And so you can pray as much as you want, right? It's currencies, the more you pray, the weaker your currency gets, actually. Because that time you would have used to produce things, you are using to pray. So the PPP value is 853. The hamburger index, very simple. Go to Burger King here and buy a Super Big Mac and divide it by $5.38, which is what it sells in New York. You get 1,431. So that's the speculative value of the currency. So you have four values: 1,285 in parallel market, 890 NAFEM, PPP 853, and hamburger 1,431. So how will one go to the other, or which one is going to run away from you? That's the question that everybody is asking. So, inevitable policy changes, because they are all linked. That's why we call it general equilibrium. The link number one is you have to come to terms with your debt, right? What is your total debt, and when is it due? Don't forget, you don't have to pay your debt. You could refinance it based on the fundamentals of your economy. People don't go around. If the United States was to pay off its debt, the economy will come to a halt tomorrow. But it's about fiscal sustainability. So debt rescheduling, external, domestic. If you are to adjust the interest rates, not all at one fell swoop, sequenced in a way, then the cost of debt service for servicing the deficit, right, will increase. And there's a price for that. But technically speaking, when interest rates increase, the marginal propensity to save increases. If that increases, then the marginal propensity to consume begins to decline and inflation over time begins to moderate. Money supply more efficiently, and every time we say there's palliatives, this and that, at the end of the day, it's all printing money. And the more you print, the less the value is, right? So an efficient foreign exchange market basically have an auction, let the central bank participate as one of the players, and everybody, from that way, even if it goes to 1,700, next week nobody will buy it at 1,000. It begins to come back all the way. Look, we paid part of our airline debt. We've done this, but the more you pay, the more expensive the tickets become. So somebody's screwing somebody here. So that's what's happening. So people are now getting tired to say, look, you will say we should do this and look at the outcome. You will say, you economists say we should do this, see the outcome. So people are getting frustrated and confused. And when that happens, they become even more confused and the money begins to go out. So instead of since June, we've been doing all these reforms. How much money has come into the economy? So what is it that we are doing wrong that is making people, not having confidence? So cost-reflected tariffs. I just heard on the radio on my way here that the amount of subsidy for electricity alone was 700 billion naira. Not a big amount, right? But it's something. Petrol subsidy reduction. I keep on hearing the removal of petrol subsidy. Nothing has been removed. What you have done is to reduce it, right? And then to that extent, the amount being subsidized is reducing, and that's good. But if you were to take it out all at one fell swoop, it could create all sorts of disruptions. So then the big elephant in the room is wages. Because when you have, there's a philosophy of indexation that if inflation increases by 10%, increase wages by 10%. But that's a bridge to nowhere. They tried it in Brazil, tried it in Argentina, tried it in Israel. It doesn't work, right? So it's time for wage review. And the last time we did it was 2019. We said 5 years later. But that was minimum wage review. That's not total wage review, right? When you do total wage review, it has an impact of some sort. 1, how much? 2, what date, effective date? 3, what are you going to do with the arrears, right? So every time this was done, Adebo, Udoji, and all of this, it ended up in a catastrophe, right? Because the moment you announce it, all the wives will tell their husband, we know how much you've got, and we also know how much the arrears are because we know the date. And it causes confusion both in the marketplace and the home front, right? So we have that. And there are other things that need to be reviewed. The last time we reviewed the inflation basket, which we are supposed to do every 5 years, was 2009. We are 4 times late. Like we should have done it 2014, 2018, and 2020, whatever it is. So we haven't reviewed the basket. We haven't reconstituted the basket because your consumption pattern in 2009 was totally different from what it is today, right? So the inflation numbers we are talking about may not, I'm not just saying may, is not reflective of current consumption patterns, right? Then another thing that hasn't been done is rebasing of the GDP so that we know what it is. Every time you do that, it also pushes you into a bracket of that precludes you from accessing debt forgiveness and all those things. So we have wage review, we have reconstitution of the inflation basket, we have rebasing of the GDP, and we have other things. Of course, the census to know how many we are. I think that's basically some of the things that we need to do. Now, what are the imperatives and the impact? We have 4 options. Do nothing, option number 1. 2, do the wrong things. 3, do the right thing in small doses, sequencing. and then do the right things all at once and face disruption. We think that the smart thing to do is to do the right things in small doses and sequencing, sending the right signals to the market, especially our creditors. Because we are at the mercy of investors, we are at the mercy of our creditors, we are at the mercy of our consumers, and more than anything else, we are at the mercy of our voters. So, more aggressive tax collection and more efficient and aggressive tax collection. Oyedele is here. All right. Further reduction in subsidies. Probability of more aggressive and efficient tax collection is moderate. Increase tax to GDP ratio from 10 to 15%, if we can, and if that is correct, I think people say it's more like 5% now. Increase 365-day treasury bills rate towards 29%, it's now 2%, right? This paper was prepared before. Yeah, this week we dropped it at the primary market. Increase PMS price towards the diesel price, depending on where it is, maybe, but you need to have that in mind. Electricity tariffs from 65 naira per kilowatt to about 90 naira. Wholesale Dutch auction and minimum wage review. Let's say that we have to move it. It's now 30,000. When we did it, that was $75. To do $75 today in the current market, you need about almost 85,000 naira. But that will kill business. So we are saying maybe 50K at this time. But most people are paying 50K anyway. And even if you're not paying them 50K, the staff are stealing enough from you to make the 50K. So in economics, we say that every factor will earn its marginal revenue product, right? Either directly or indirectly. That's what his theory says. So policy and impact on SMEs, because we have SMEs, right, because there are 4 layers. There's the government, there are multinationals and investors, there are conglomerates, there are commercials, there are retail, and all the way artisans, all the way down. So if you carry out policies that only to the advantage of the multinationals and the government, you are leaving the rest of the country behind. So there's what we call the flow-through effect, and those lack of linkages in the economy are one of the major bottlenecks that we have. So MTN can do all it wants, but if it doesn't flow through to the others, it makes no sense. So, small scale and medium enterprises are mostly found in the following sectors: trade, manufacturing, agriculture, accommodation and food services, transportation and storage. So, these are the major areas. So, what are the opportunities? For trade, interest rates, they have sector sensitivity. High interest rates make trade probably unprofitable in the short run. Exchange rate are very highly sensitive to that. Petrol subsidy, so you see it's the trading sector, right? Manufacturing are high in all places except moderate in petrol subsidy reduction. Why? Because they use diesel already to move their goods. Construction is doing better than most other areas. Its interest rates are high, but they get mobilization. Exchange rate high but the beauty of the exchange rate is that now, if the foreign exchange is available, there are 2 factors. One is the depreciation of the currency. The other one is availability of the exchange. So many corporates that we spoke to said, I don't care what the rate is, but let me have it when I need it, right? So the guaranteed supply is more important than the exchange rate volatility. They don't want to go and start begging people in the central bank and doing all sorts of things. So we find that in all of these things, increased taxes, people don't pay taxes anyway, but now with online and digital channels, the tax collection is actually increasing and improving, not because people have become more altruistic, but because there's no place to hide. So thanks to Yodele. So agriculture, cost-reflective tariffs, agricultural people don't need any electricity in the farm. They can get their solar. But you can see that wage review, they don't pay, they pay in kind. That is, you bring pineapples and you give it back to, right? So agriculture is quite interesting. Telecoms are doing well, but the pass-through effect, right? The fact that they can pass through their cost to the consumer in telco makes them kind of insulated from these shocks. Then oil and gas, of course, oil and gas, they borrow overseas, and cost reflected, they don't need electricity in the rig, right? And so that's what we see initially. Now, so coming directly to what happens, upstream, production, interest rate hike, borrowing cost is red for them because they borrow both internationally and some of them domestically. Exchange rate stability, cost of agricultural inputs are lower because tractors, machines, and seeds and all of that, they really don't care. Wage review, cost of labor, sector is labor sensitive and consumer demand increases. So for manufacturing, if you increase wages, also the people that are buying from you have more money to buy from you. Storage and distribution, logistics costs are high because there's post-harvest losses that you bring out your yams and then you spend 6 hours on the road between Benin and Ashagamu and then another 6 hours on Lagos Ibadan. By the time you get to Oyigbo, the yam has already deteriorated in quality. So now that the roads are going to be concessioned out, and theoretically and practically I know that it's going to be much faster. You'll be able to do Lagos Ibadan in 1 hour, 30 minutes. That reduces the cost. Even though the price of diesel has increased, you are spending only 1.5 hours rather than spending 4 hours, right? So effective cost of doing business actually drops. The same thing, the post-harvest losses drop. The storage business becomes more attractive, right? And so these are the things that we see. So increase in PMS price, increased logistics cost, but efficient roads reduces the cost of transportation. Cost-reflective tariffs, yes, if eco distribution, I pay more to them and I pay less for diesel, if the impact is better for me. So yes, the marginal cost increases, but the average cost reduces. Upstream, you can see upstream has 4 greens and 3 reds. Profit after tax reduces because they're going to be collecting more. Cost of labor increases, but not that much, and their borrowing cost increases. Downstream, distribution finance, red, and then green. But here, this is where the Dangote refinery and all of that begin to kick in. Okay. So, major opportunities. This is road concessioning. And you can see, because the roads have been concessioned and the exit ramps are very few. So 2 things happen. One, and they are maintained. As you pay your toll, you maintain, probably pay 2,000 naira for every truck and 100 or 200 naira for every car. The car count that I've seen shows that there are some very viable roads in certain centers of the country. That way, okay, thank you. So that way, you see that the cost of transportation and cost of distribution, and then the security risk, because of these barriers, which are about 3 feet to 4 feet high, and you cannot exit. So you have to come. First of all, you have to jump onto over the central reservation into the road, kidnap your target, then you have to climb with your target over 3 or 4 feet up before you run into the bush. So it becomes unviable, right? Before you now start thinking of phoning the man's parents or wife to bring money for ransom. So this road concessioning solves, one, distribution and logistics cost, but it also addresses the question of kidnap and ransom and insecurity. And also, you will see on those roads, they have CCTV cameras and all sorts of communication gadgets. And that, if you did that on the major highways, right, because there'll be alternative roads. Those who don't want to pay toll can use the alternative road and then also deal with the kidnappers and all of that, right? But those people are not likely to have any money to pay ransom. So the kidnappers will go where the money is, right? So that way you solve those 2 problems. And what do you have on the roads? Fast food thing, paid public services, toilets and all of that, structural repair centers. You can see all of this. So the revenue from concessioning and the advantage for the economy are beyond imagination. And what more, the amount of money that Ben has to pay for maintenance of roads drops sharply because the roads are no longer, so he will have more money to put into medical education and other things which are useful to the people, right? So that is one of the big advantages of this. So increased tax rate, efficient tax collection. But the bad thing about it is that the rich and the poor pay the same toll. So it's regressive, but it's easy to collect revenue, it's easy to administer, but it's not neutral in terms of allocation of resources. So exchange rate sanitization, export smuggling, because when we carried out our survey on Igbo market last month in January. No, this month actually. And we found certain explanations, the price of onions went up sharply. And we asked, why is the price of onions? Because there are two onions, there's a brown one and there's a green one. So the guy, why is the price of onions up? And the man said, don't you see what's happening to the Naira dollar rate? So I said, how do you use Form M to bring in onions? He said, no, that the truth is that I can either sell to you or go across the border and sell and get CFA franc. So the exchange rate, the price I'm giving you is the opportunity cost of selling across the border. That's how the exchange. So when you hear these people say, oh, the price of yam, and I say, what has dollar got to do with yam? That is what dollar has to do with yam. So I hope we understand it very clearly. So there's export smuggling, boosting global commodity supply. That affects the opportunities there. So what's happening in Ukraine and all that. And global food prices have actually declined. So if we manage the exchange rate well, manage our movement of goods properly, you can actually begin to bring food inflation, which is 33%, bringing it down now. So, as a tool of economic management, the budget is very good. This is what we have. This is how much we have spent. This is how much people have used. This is what they have done. This is how much has leaked, right? And so, what next? Let's ask ourselves, how have we performed as? So the goals are to stimulate growth, boost employment, equitable distribution of income and wealth, debt management, boosting investment levels. Those are the broad goals. So the budget, if you look at it in Naira terms, increased by 31.84 to 28.78 trillion from 21.83 trillion in 2023. But if you use whatever exchange rate you use, you end up with $24 billion. You find that in dollar terms, the amount spent has reduced. And let's double it because it's a federal government budget alone. Let's assume that federal government is 50% and states and local government is 50%. That's not the ratio, but so it's $50 billion. $50 billion in a $400 billion economy, it's not going to scratch the surface. What it tells you that theoretically and nominally, government expenditure is important, right? But it is not the only, it's necessary but not sufficient to, right? So you need investor money, you need project finance, and you need to do some things differently. So the budget has 5 things: how much you earn, how much you spend, the deficit, how to fund it, and as a tool of economic management. Right? So this is how new borrowings, privatization proceeds, and multilateral and bilateral loans. That's a mode of spending, funding the budget. So in the last 5 years, the revenue target, Nigeria has underperformed its revenue target by about 40% in the last 5 years. So what is the budget process? Every ministry just brings out a calculator, add 10%. So is it granular enough? Is the intellectual rigor in each of these ministries, department, agencies, is it rigor strong enough? But at least there's a process. Now, these are the 3 types of budget which I talked about earlier. And then The budget is used to smoothing out the cycle of economic cycle. So what we don't want are slumps. What we don't want is a runaway boom, right? So this is the budget deficit in green, and that's the real GDP growth. So is there any correlation between the deficit and growth? Yes, maybe, but also if you plot leakages and growth, you'll find a similar correlation. So goals of 2024 budget: job-rich economic growth, increase revenue to GDP from less than 10 to 18%, blah, 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 increase capital spend, poverty reduction. These are very lofty ideas. The truth is that by next year, we are going to be looking at it. The assumptions, very simple: GDP growth to 3.8, fair, I think that's achievable. Oil price of $77, today the price is $77, so we are at the benchmark price. The production of 1.78 when our quota is 1.5, call something. Exchange rate 2023 was 435, now it's 800. It moved from 750 to 800, which is more realistic. And if you look at the PPP value, we are in the ballpark. Inflation at 21.4. This is the first time we have projected an inflation rate that is closer to reality than it was in other times. 16.98, and we ended up at 30. Okay, so budget performance in the last 2 years, you can see most of it red, right? And the target was 3.75, we got 2.45. Oil price 98. No, actually it was positive because we used a target of 75 and the actual price was 83. So all the other things we know already. So summary and conclusion: Nigeria consistently adopted a deficit budget. A counter-fiscal policy aimed at boosting aggregate demand and economic growth. That is the Keynesian model. It works. Nigeria's intersectoral linkages between sectors are weak and tenuous, because if you boost agriculture and the markets are there to buy it and there's no road to carry the goods, then that's what we call weak linkages. So you must take a concentric view of it. So increased infrastructure spend will strengthen intersectoral linkages. Improved linkages will buoy output and reduce inflation, leading to a virtuous cycle of prosperity from a vicious cycle of poverty. Right? And so what do we expect? Nigeria will remain more integrated with the global economy. Nigeria will be vulnerable to exogenous shocks because of this, especially global oil prices and supply chain shocks. Nigeria will also need to come to terms with its domestic and external debt situation. You can run, but you can't hide. Right? Expected to begin talks with the IMF. I know people will chop off people's heads here, but whether we like it or not, where I come from, when you go to visit somebody and you're hungry, say, do you want to eat? Say, no, I don't want to eat. No, I have food at home. After a while, we say, let us not die of hunger. Bring the food that you wanted to give to them. So there are lags between policies: decision-making lag, policy implementation lag, and results economic takeoff. Policy reforms without institutional reform will only make things worse. So that's where we are. Economy is stratified into 5 levels: government, multinational, conglomerate, commercials, SMEs. Everybody is here. So first beneficiary is government, second beneficiary are the multinational, third beneficiary are commercials, SMEs, and retail. All of these things are going to happen in 2024, 2025. So let's leave here on a semi-optimistic note that things will get better. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Or no questions? Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bismarck. Please, let's put our hands together again for excellent job, as usual, by our guest speaker today, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. While Mr. Bismarck was making that presentation, I was very observant. I was looking at, permit me to say, Mr. Budget himself, taking notes rigorously. I believe those notes will get to the number 1 and get to the appropriate quarters. I didn't see Mr. Taiwo taking note, but I know he was taking mental notes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Right, before I bring in the commissioner, you know, we had to skip the commissioner's time to have Mr. Bismarck because she wasn't there. But I'm told we have the commissioner online now. But just before I bring in the commissioner for commerce, Lagos State, let me recognize quickly the presence of our leaders that joined us while we were having Mr. Bismarck. We had with us the vice president. We have with us, when he was making his speech, the deputy president here at SCCI, Engineer Leye Kupoloyi. Let's put our hands together for the deputy president. Thank you so much. We also had joined him while we were having that session, Otumba Kimbo Akimba, the vice president here at SCCI. Thank you so much. We also had with us our honorary life vice president here at SCCI. We are very unique. We recognize and respect our leaders. We had with us Engineer J. Olumaduka, honorary life vice president, our mother. Thank you so much, man. Thank you. Thank you. We also had with us our sister, Ms. Bembatum Shade Young. Shade Bembemtu Young. Thank you so much, man. Honorary life advice at SCCI, honorary life vice president. Thank you so much. We also had with us Abel Edoya, head of business development at Linkage Assurance, our sponsor. Do we have him? Oh, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. We also had with us Jude Chiemeka, FCS, acting CEO at NGS. Let's put our hands together for him, please. Oh, thank you so much, sir. Why should my people give you that seat? Okay, all right, no problem. Thank you so much. All right. Honorable Commissioner, do we have you with us now, ma?
Yes.
Honorable Commissioner, ma. IT, is she in? All right. I think we may have to skip that. To coordinate the next set of activities today, let me invite to the podium the Director of Research and Advocacy here at SCCI, Mr. Tony Moyo. Let's put our hands together for Tony.
While growing up in the 80s, and it used to marvel me a great deal that somebody was known by his first name. Unfortunately, he's not in our midst today, and that person was Gani. If you say Gani, everybody knew whom you were talking about. Let me just add Fawemi. One other person has achieved that status in Nigeria. We all know when we hear Bismarck, we know who we are talking about, don't we? Yeah. Let me welcome the keynote speaker to the panel session. We have also, as part of the panelist, the Director General, Office of the Budget of the Federation, Bernard Kaweze. Before his appointment as the Director General of the Budget Office. He was also the former Commissioner of Planning and Budget for Lagos State. Before then, he was one-time former Managing Director and CEO, Nile Merchant Bank. Importantly, or most importantly, Ben Akabueze was my boss at Nile Merchant Bank. Sir, you're welcome. You're meeting your boy again. Yeah, to moderate this session is one of the shining ladies in Nigeria today. She's done so well beyond for herself. She's done so well for Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Ms. Chinwe Egwim. She is the Chief Economist, Coronation Merchant Bank. Ms. Egwim, you're welcome. Thank you. So we have... Okay. But before we go fully into the panel session, we have the Honorable Commissioner, and she's ready to speak to us. Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to the Honorable Commissioner of Trade, Lagos State, our host state. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Is it ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Can you hear me? Oh, they can't hear me. Okay. Hello? Okay, let me
Please
see.
hang on, ma. Just a minute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I will invite Ms. Egwim to...
Okay.
Okay. The Honorable Commissioner seems ready now.
Can you all hear me? Good afternoon. Maybe you have multiple devices on over there.
Egwim, please.
Sorry, someone is in this meeting, this board, and it's not muted, and to speak in the audio. We can't tell all this to the whole party. And it's not the boss of that.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Yes. Good now. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tony, for those introductions. So my job today is really to moderate or steer this conversation. As you all know, the panel is made up of distinguished experts with a good wealth of knowledge in their respective fields. And so I'm very excited about this conversation. I hope everyone has their notepads ready to get essential nuggets. I'm going to start the question session with Mr. Ben Akabueze. The first question I have for you really is this. Given the fiscal challenges that we all know that we have, or Nigeria is facing right now in recent years, I'll give it to you. How does the Budget Office plan to align budgetary priorities with economic resilience in 2024, especially in the face of rising inflation? My projections show that inflation will remain elevated. It's going to peak in March before we start seeing tiny dips. And of course, currency depreciations.
I think it's now afternoon. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. As we say in Nigeria, all protocols respectfully observed. I think even when Bismarck made his presentation, you saw outlined the policy objectives of the budget, and I think that they all basically speak to the challenges that we see currently in the economy. So if the question is, do we think that the budget can deliver on those objectives, I'll be a lot more positive than Bismarck was in terms of the budget being able to deliver on those objectives. Is it a silver bullet? No. Is it a perfect budget? No. But then, in our current circumstances, okay, I believe that the budget, our biggest fiscal challenge is raising public, revenues. Okay, without the low public revenues, against the background of ever increasing demand for public goods and services, with our population growing, rapidly and all of that, has resulted in, for at least the past for over 2 decades now, indeed, we have been running deficit, budgets. And those deficits have accumulated. They've been funded through debt consistently for almost 3 decades now that we've been running deficit budgets. And the truth is that we haven't been paying back. It's been accumulating because we haven't been paying back principal, at least on the domestic debt. It's just been every year the deficit we add on to it, so it's growing. And so now we are at a point where there are concerns about debt sustainability, and so we can't continue to grow the deficit at that rate. So the deficit for 2024 is about 3.81% of GDP, and interestingly, I mean, it wasn't intentional, but 3.88% of that itself. So we think that, okay, the deficit, of course, when you start to deficit, it also adds an inflationary impact. But then, as you saw even in Bismarck's presentation, we have adopted the philosophy, the Keynesian philosophy, that you have to act counter-cyclically in a situation like this. A lot of people think, oh, why don't you cut expenditure? That's not a feasible option that we have currently. And in the first place, we're not even spending enough. If you look at our public expenditure to GDP ratio, it's one of the lowest, even on the continent. So spending less is not an option for us. Spending more efficiently, yes, in some areas. But even that, when people say, oh, you need to spend more efficiently, when you decompose the budget between what we call discretionary and non-discretionary components, the non-discretionary expenditure in the budget, there's not much room to spend less, in terms of debt service, because you've got the debt to service. Bismarck talked about the possibility of debt rescheduling, but that's something, again, that the markets don't like to hear. I mean, during the World Bank meeting in October last year, the finance minister then granted an interview, and in the process, she used the word debt restructuring, just hinted that Nigeria could consider debt restructuring. There and then, within the 24 hours, there was mayhem in terms of, the pricing of Nigeria. So it's not it's a very sensitive option to even discuss. That of course we look for opportunities to refinance obligations to cheaper options. But the point is the scope to reduce your debt service, which is currently almost about a third of the budget itself in terms of this. And so, and then you look at personnel cost. That itself is another 30% of, and then there's some basic costs of even maintaining the security architecture of so the discretionary component of the spending is not a whole lot. So cutting expenditure is not thing, and the scope of even saving by greater efficiency is not. There's not a lot of it. So we have to basically continue with the deficit budget to give us even that, barely, adequate level of public expenditure. The solution, therefore, must be, to drive up revenues, and hopefully, you will hold Taiwan's feet to the fire on that. So, I think just the broad perspective in terms of our philosophy in preparing the budget.
Thank you so much for that response. I'm going to go over to Taiwo now. Taiwo, now, as the chairman of the Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, could you elaborate on the key fiscal recommendations for 2024 that aim to stimulate economic growth while maintaining fiscal discipline?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I would also stand on the existing protocols, if you permit me. Before I come to your question, Shinwe, while the SCCI president was making his remark, he spoke about risk and opportunities. So I thought I should just make some remarks on the things that are beginning to move in the right direction. So it's not all negative. One of that is that, and I know that before you establish a trend, you need more than one period. So the inflation itself, even though it's still rising, is rising at a slower pace. So, and what that means to me is we're getting towards the end of it. And of course, like economists will say, also the base effect, which means in 2024, it will not get worse, it would get better. On top of that is also the fact that inflation around the world, particularly in the developed economies where they tend to extract capital from us when they raise their rates, is moderating. And so we're also expecting that there will be rate cuts, although the US now, inflation went up a little bit. So if Fed, for example, start cutting rates, that's good for us, extremely good for us. Oil production is rising, actually. So it's not where it needs to be, but it's rising. And I know we have the OPEC quota, but once you start refining locally, it gives you that extra margin because they can't regulate what you refine locally. So which means Nigeria can actually produce 2 million barrels per day, just give 600 to Dangote, and you still have your quota intact to be able to export. The refining actually coming on stream is also very positive. And I'll tell you about, the price of diesel. While we can debate whether PMS has subsidy reduction or removal, we can say clearly that there's a lot of inefficiency in the price of diesel. And this is how it works. So if you look at the international ex-refining price, and in fact look at even pump price around the world, what you find on the average, somewhere in the region of 20 to 80% of the pump price is taxes alone. In Nigeria, there's no tax. So take out the tax, take out, and you see that there's no basis for the liter of diesel to be more than $1, which is where we are now. So in our engagement with the operators, there are a number of issues. Number one, you do an LC in Nigeria, your LC is funded. So it's not really a letter of credit. You fund it. You put money down, then you do the exit. So the money is borrowed. So there's finance costs. Because we haven't been able to honor the letter of credit, the supplier said, well, I can't supply you anymore. So that same person who already borrowed to do LC, borrowed again. This time around, went to the parallel market to find the dollars to pay to get the diesel. So that's two finance costs. When you get the diesel in, and the exchange rate is 1,200 in the parallel market, you are not using 1,200. You are using the rate you think it will be when you need to replace it. So you add a premium to it, 1,314, right? So if you take out those inefficiencies because we are refining locally, I'm very confident that the price of diesel will come down, and that is positive. Budget deficits, we are now down from 6.1 last year to about 3.8, right? Moving in the right direction. Government revenue for the first 9 months of last year, despite the reform just being in the second half, by the time we have the numbers for the full year, government revenue were on target. I don't want to announce for the FRS, their numbers exceeded what they plan to collect. So that's also positive. Debt service as a ratio of revenue is declining. It was about 96% in 2022. It will be much less in 2023 and going forward to 24 and thereafter. The percentage that government plans to spend on capital expenditure, and I've looked at the budget not only at the federal level, but also across the states, is much higher. And the percentage increase in recurrent is moderate, despite the plan to increase wages and all of that. And the amount of spending allocated to human capital, both education and health, much better than we've had for a long time. And in the last 2 quarters, maybe even more, we had trade surplus, right? So which means, in fact, we say this thing about Nigeria being heavily import dependent. The data is not supportive of that. If you look at how much we import as a percentage of GDP, it's one of the lowest in the world. In fact, much lower than many African countries. Our problem is that we're not exporting enough. Because this idea of wanting to produce everything itself is creating a problem. We then impose a lot of tariff, we close the border, and people can't buy ordinary rice. Maybe we are not good at producing rice. Maybe we should just produce something else. The stock market, one of the best performing last year, over 40%. Anyway, I'll stop there. I'll quickly answer your question. I thought it would be good to just try and think about what's working, why we are working on the things that could work better, and the ones that we don't like. And there are plenty of them. So in terms of the key policy recommendations for 2024, we in the committee, and my sister is a member of that committee, the moderator. So we try to look at those issues from a strategic viewpoint. What are the most pressing issues we're facing as a country? Price stability around inflation, forex liquidity, issues to do with attracting investments, and also just making life a lot easier for our people. So those are the things driving our recommendations. So I'll tell you just a few of them because of our time. One of our recommendations, for example, is for the government to suspend, that's for 2024, to suspend some taxes. We've identified about 5, we call them nuisance taxes, that just frustrate people, yet we can't even see the money in government treasury. So the MBS said that all the local government that gave them reports in 2022 did not even collect 50 billion naira, all of them. Yet, you hear transporters bringing yam from the north to the south, paying average of 450,000 naira in all manners of taxes and levies before they arrive. When you finish, if it's 2,000 tubers of yam, won't you spread the money over it? And then we are surprised that the difference between inflation in the rural area and the urban center is almost 400 basis points. Those are self-inflicted. I know that the road is not fantastic, like my brother said, Mr. Bismarck, but there's also the additional one that we added that we don't need to. So we've been engaging even with the subnational because we can't force it on them. But we're trying to let them understand that we need to suspend these taxes while we fix the problem more structurally. And we'll try and find money for you from other sources to take care of the opportunity cost of the money you are giving away. We recommended, and that has already been implemented, waiver of VAT on diesel, and then subsequently CNG and LPG. That's also to moderate and bring down some of the costs that are fueling inflation. We have recommendations to promote exports, including particularly services and intellectual property. Before you start exporting goods, it takes time. You need a lot of infrastructure, but you need less of that for intangibles and services. We just need to fix, and we know where the problems are, mostly regulation, policies, and laws. So we've drafted an emergency economic intervention bill, amending about 15 different laws that we hope will soon get to the National Assembly. And we've been engaging with the lawmakers that this has to be done with speed like yesterday because there's a sense of urgency. For example, just asking Nigerian companies and businesses to pay all manners of taxes and levies in dollars alone is about $3.5 billion annually. But if you start thinking about it, you wonder how we even came up with that idea in the first place. How does it help us? That a Nigerian company will go to the market to go and look for dollar, the little that is in Nigeria, so we can use it to pay the government of Nigeria. It has nothing to our liquidity, but it adds to the pressure against the naira. So just amend the law, you take that pressure away overnight. We also have ideas and areas we've identified to improve digital job opportunities, especially for our young people, right? So with the naira depreciation in Nigeria, our guys are smart. Their English is even better than the Indians, who make almost $200 billion a year. Philippines made $35 billion in 2022. Let's even make 20 first, which we can easily make in Nigeria once we remove the impediment that we have identified to create those opportunities for our people. So they'll earn the FX, which helps with liquidity. They'll pay taxes because that's income they are earning. The government gets money from it, and those people also take care of their family. So the last one I'll speak to, otherwise I know I can continue for the whole day, is we also believe that the sacrifices of the Nigerian people. So we did first subsidy removal or reduction, if you talk to Bismarck. Whatever we call it, that's close to 4 trillion naira savings a year. We did naira flotation. It's not perfect, but whatever it is, that revenue, and you'd have noticed, we call it exchange gain, right? Now we factored it into the budget. Whatever way you look at it, we have also close to another 4 trillion. So you're talking about roughly 8 trillion you've transferred from the private sector or the people to the government. So what we're saying to the government is, can we be intentional in spending this 8 trillion to make sure that it impacts the people most positively? Start with the multidimensional poverty index. Why is it that 133 million, I'm sure it's more now, are living in multidimensional poverty? Maybe they don't need the International Worship Center, right? Maybe what they need is road from the farm to the market. Maybe they need solar power storage so that they don't waste their tomato and pepper. So those conversations are the things we are having now. I want to develop a platform where we can track how those monies are being spent, just to put the pressures on the political leaders. And we also identified a few areas where we could relieve small businesses from the burden of tax. We have a draft withholding tax regulation because small businesses, very small ones, micro and nano, have been exempted from company income tax, from VAT, but we saw there was still a loophole. Even PAY, they don't have to pay until 30,000, but the withholding tax was still there. So we've now drafted the law to also taking that burden off them. At least, like Mr. President said, let the poor breathe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. So let me go over to Bismarck. Amazing presentation as always. I want to hinge on the inflation indicator, given that we got the figures yesterday. And yesterday we did release a flash note from Coronation, and the concluding bullet that I put in there was that it would be good to see a firmer handshake between the monetary authorities and the fiscal authorities, because if we want to be honest with ourselves, the inflation problem is not strictly from a demand pull perspective where you have the monetary policy tackling or combating rising inflation, but there's a cost push element, as you did express in your presentation. So can you please give us 3 recommendations that can be taken back to these to the leadership of these authorities? What should they really be doing to have that firm handshake?
Thank you. I think that 2 schools of thought on inflation. There's what you call core inflation, which is inflation less seasonalities and energy prices. And core inflation, actually, when you see core inflation increasing, it means that inflation is more structural than you think. Then there's other inflationary measures which look at transient nature. In Nigeria now we are facing both core inflation, which is structural, and we're also facing the transient inflation. So, like I said, the answer to this is not 1, 2, 3. It's a mindset issue that you cannot do all of these things at once. Because, like I said, 2024 is a year of surprises and the predictable. You can actually begin to move in a sequence form, right? And once the markets see that you are moving intentionally and directionally in terms of bringing down, increasing the interest rates to deal with money supply management, high-powered money, you do some of the things that are cost-pushed in nature, like, making sure, take a decision on concessionary roads and close it. Don't go back and forth. Just close that transaction immediately. And people now know that this can happen. Then finally, I think the whole foreign exchange market management system. So in that way, you've dealt with the cost of transportation. You've dealt with money supply management and the inflation factor differential. And then price discovery and ensure that you have a grip on your foreign exchange management system. Starting point, what is the true level of the net external reserves without encumbrances? It's better to say what it is than to allow the market speculate as what it is. Everybody knows what it is. So let's come out and say that's what it is, and then we go with it. So 1, come out clean on the level of your external reserves. Make your foreign exchange market more efficient and transparent. Will it deteriorate? Will it depreciate? Yes. But whatever depreciates will always come back because we know what the numbers will look like. Yeah. Thirdly, begin to move your interest rates in a manner that show that you are serious where you're taking it, in a sequenced, deliberate manner. And finally, like Taiwo said, these multiple taxes and this system of revenue raising system, which smacks of an extortion racket, has to stop. Because if these revenues are raised and we've done that already, and it's not transparently spent, then we are going to have a lot of pushback. Because essentially 8 trillion naira has come from people's pockets to government pocket. And it has to be spent efficiently so that there's a multiplier trigger. We did it before, and what the outcome was that we took money from people and created Sure P. Sure P was there, and they were having meetings, having breakfast, having drinks, and nothing happened. Then the country ended up in a recession. So stranded money has a negative investment multiplier. The money must work, must go quickly. And I think that's the most important thing. Let's have that investment and government multiplier and do all these other things that are happening and come to terms with our reality that there's a place for former rich men in a country. So when I say Nigeria is a former rich country, right, and now has to deal with its reality.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm still going to hold on to you for a bit. Your GDP projection, you put I think 3.3% year on year for this year. Ours is 3%, so very similar. But I do take your note on it's higher than population growth, but still the gap is not sufficient, and so that would not allow for inclusive growth. So I just want to pick your brain just a little bit, because I know you did touch upon it, but with a focus on inclusive growth, how can economic policies really be designed to address income inequality? Because you're even seeing that some people in the middle income class are slipping into a lower, yes, so let's discuss that.
First and foremost, let's grow the pie, right? Then before we talk about to share it. So growing the pie means removing the bottleneck in the economy, right? And aligning these linkages. And you'll be surprised how a linkage, right, could mean so much. And a bottleneck could mean so much. In the last 2-3 days, just this whole thing about the Third Mainland Bridge has increased travel time and reduced productivity so much. But can we avoid doing it? We have to do it. Yeah. But I'm just trying to tell you that decision, right? Or if we say, look, we are only going to do it at midnight, and if we can get the people to work at midnight, right? But the cost of downtime and the bottleneck is beyond imagination, right? And it stares at you everywhere in this country. I heard one minister saying yesterday they're going to build 15 kilometers every month or something. In this country in the 80s, 70s, Julius Berger and Strabag and all these people were building roads at night here. And the entire ring road and all of that, Third Mainland Bridge, those things were built in the same, with a different work ethic, right? And productivity happened. So I'm not sure that what has happened is that the ethic has fallen out, the productivity has fallen away, people are demoralized and all that. So we, just debottlenecking the economy and making people see that means a lot. Yeah, look at the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. It used to take, God knows, 6 hours to go to Ibadan. Now, if you can get to Alakbere or whatever it is, you can do it in 1 hour or 1.5 hours. So that means a lot in terms of productivity, just moving goods, services, and people and moving money around. And finally, the whole idea of what we saw when we had the Naira redesign or Naira thing was that in spite of the fact that cash in circulation was only 6% of money supply, bringing a bottleneck to that process itself brought the economy to its knees, even though it was only 6% of liquidity. So I want you to understand that no element of this economy, especially the informal economy, is too small, right? So triggering incentives to the small and medium-scale businesses, triggering incentives, making sure that everything works, right, is extremely important. So confidence, debottlenecking, right, and coming to terms with the fact that putting the truth out to the people. That, you see, we think that even 3.3 is very modest.
Yes.
If you do some of these things in the first half, you could get as high as 5%.
I agree. I agree with that. Thank you so much. So let me come back to you, Mr. Bernard Kabrizi. So this question I'm about to ask you is not in my notes, actually. I just remembered something, that there was a mild debate around the budget allocation figures. And this happened, I think, on Tuesday. And there were concerns around how much was allocated to agriculture. So I don't know if you can please give us some insights on your thoughts, because I remember we did see education have above 5%. Infrastructure had a good percentage as well, defense and security, but I think when we did the calculation, it was about 2% for agriculture. So given that that is a sector that is regarded as an economic backbone, I think the concerns were why was it low?
Well, you see, when we talk about government's budgetary allocation to agriculture, we're never going to, first we've got to see agriculture as a business. It's like asking me what is government's allocation to telecommunications. So when government is trying to fund agriculture, government is not in the business of producing whatever, and that's what we have seen, because the more money we have allocated, if you look at the budget for agriculture, vis-a-vis what it was like 8 years ago, the budget is about 5 times. It hasn't resulted in 5 times improved productivity in the sector. So the solution is not more money. The solution is to make the sector more attractive to private investment. That's what's going to give us growth in agriculture. And then when you talk about budget for agriculture, people are looking at the budget for Ministry of Agriculture. What about the budget in works, in Ministry of Works, the budget for roads that lead to the major agricultural zones? They're part of the budget for agriculture. If you go to Ministry of Environment, the budget to address climate change challenges that impact agriculture, the budget to deal with erosion and whatever, they're all part of things that enable agriculture. So when people look at the allocation to agriculture, we need to look at it with a different mindset. So that's answering that question directly.
I still have another question for you. Now, given you did mention private sector right now, so thank you for that. And given the importance of the private sector participation, how does the Budget Office plan to collaborate? I have been part of stakeholder engagements that have happened from the Budget Office, but I want to know, are there additional efforts being made with regards to collaboration with the private sector to implement some of these initiatives that may be coming out from there? And I know that it's not a standalone office, that there are other offices that do engage with the Budget Office, but if you can please share some insights with us, because a handful of us in here are from the private sector.
Thank you. There's some new initiatives in the 2024 budget that will expand the scope for collaboration with the private sector. There is, for instance, a fund for consumer credit, where government is setting aside in the budget 100 billion naira, to basically, promote and support and enable growth in the, and also help de-risk consumer, credit. What that does is increase demand, effective demand for goods, and therefore the manufacturing sector and other even this sector, can then see out, experience output growth. So, but government doesn't intend to then set up shop to be handing out consumer credits and whatever. So that's something that we will have to work through private sector organizations. There's also some, fund set aside again to, help drive mortgage lending. There are a few of those funds that we set aside to try to help. There is the money for the student loan program. Again, all of those things are good. There's scope for collaboration. But, and then for the first time, we've actually made a provision in the budget, what we call a project preparation fund. Because people talk a lot about PPPs. PPPs are not as easy as, the private partner is not going to make the investment in the basic, what we call project preparation, make, all of the pre-feasibility studies and all of that to bring the project to, what we call bankability, at which point, so for the first time, we're actually then creating a provision to be able to support that. And I know Bismarck talked repeatedly about road concessions. The truth is, I'm not as, first it's government policy to support it, but it's not as easy as it sounds, for a number of reasons. First, we have capacity constraints in this country, and I have been part of, when I was with Lagos State, to get all of these road concession negotiations. We have capacity constraints in terms of knowledge, and even the investors, the financing of it. But it's also very politically costly. I remember, a few years ago in the budget, we took the East-West Road. Bismarck will know about that because it's part of the country. The East-West Road, one of the most important roads in the Delta, in the South-South, that cuts across. It's been under construction for over 20 years. It's been in the budget annually. We decided to take it out of the budget, okay, and put some money through the budget in what we call the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, and wanted NSIA to deal with, to take it up and deal with it, and then subsequently to toll it. Created a big uproar that, the Niger Delta that is generating all of the money that we are spending, we want to come and toll their roads, they were, whatever. So much pressure. Representations to the President Harry then and whatever. And at the end of the day, we're told to take the thing. It was taken out of the budget. And the fund we had, set aside, which was to be made available to NSIA to then drive to then put their own money, leverage, private capital, and finish this road for once and get it. The road was taken back into the budget. Of course, nothing is happening there. The reason we were able to finally deliver Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was because it was taken off the budget. And by the way, the road will be tolled. I might as well let people know that, along the line. So, the reason we were able to finally deliver the second Niger bridge is it was taken out of the budget and put in this alternative financing structure for. But some of these road concessions, can get politically expensive, and government, will back off. And then some other point that I thought I should, BJ has repeated it about interest rate, adjusting interest rate, and generally in economic theory, it's increased interest rates. If you have negative interest rates, it adversely impacts, savings and whatever. But when we look at the bank balance sheets, the deposit liability is still growing. The people who understand this logic, people in Nigeria, who the people who have the money to save or invest, know better than to invest in to put their money in deposits and stuff like that, and they either investing in foreign currency or choosing other investment options. So in the immediate effect, the truth of the matter is what we see is a significant increase in debt service costs and a growth in the fiscal deficit, and the cost of it without a commensurate bump in savings, something that is going to have the sort of impact in the marginal propensity to save, as we were saying, and that's some divergence in policy perspective that we have. So yes, while the monetary authorities are arguing that way, we on the fiscal side are saying no, we don't see that this is the likely impact.
Thank you for that response. Taiwo, this will be my final question before I open it to the floor. Now, FX liquidity constraints persist, and from my vantage point, it will persist even in the first quarter of this year. When you dig deeper and look into the different sources for liquidity, FX liquidity, FDI features as one of them. Obviously, it's a medium to long-term approach with that. So I think I would like to hear from your vantage point what insights or specific reforms that the committee is really putting forward to incentivize foreign direct investment that of course will stimulate economic activities, and the trickle-down effect would be to help with that boost in FX liquidity that we all hope to see in the near term.
Thank you very much. So I'll be careful how I answer this question, because I've also realized that there's a major challenge with just analysts. They think that if you are not working for the CBN, you shouldn't talk about interest. You should not even mention it. You should not say interest rates. You should not say exchange rates. I struggle to understand why, because I think the autonomy of the CBN has to be respected. It means that they make their decisions, but it doesn't mean nobody else can talk about it. So once you're working for the government. So please, if the press is here, don't go and do another headline tomorrow, because I remember, just talking about some of the things we're trying to do. Someone just said that I said exchange rate will be 650 to 750, and that went viral. 99.9% of people that saw that didn't read the interview. So first, we've had extensive engagement with, first domestic investors, multinationals, rating agencies. In all of this, many of them said to us, all the challenges in Nigeria combined, exchange rate alone is more than 50% of it as far as they are concerned. So which means this is a major thing that we have to address. And we thought it's going to be an area where we can easily demonstrate how the monetary and fiscal authorities can work together. So to that extent, we've done extensive amount of work from the fiscal side, and we've been speaking to the central bank about what they are planning to do, and some of our ideas, just suggesting to them about what they can also do. The ultimate objective being that, first and foremost, we think that the bigger problem we have is the fact that we have divergence in rates. So many countries have black market, nobody announces it on TV and in newspapers, right? How can we make sure that our own parallel market becomes a black market where nobody doing legitimate transaction will be interested in the rates? The World Bank said for 2023, our diaspora remittances was about $20 billion. We estimate that more than 90% of that did not get to Nigeria. They were being externalized. We've spoken to loads of Nigerians almost everywhere, from the US to the UK. They told us how they send money now. They use apps. We have the list of those apps. We've tried them out. They use parallel market rates. So you take $1,000 in New York, you just tap on your phone, you send the $1,000 to someone, a fintech. They credit Naira here in Nigeria without bringing the dollars. So first, that raises another question. You should not be able to continuously find Naira to pay without bringing the dollars. Unless, and of course, if the source of the Naira is illicit, you continue to find it. That's another conversation. But from the economic side, the question is, what can you do to ensure that that $20 billion gets here? The second point, which is equally important, is the fact that if you look at our sources of FX, whether it's diaspora remittances, whether it's export proceeds, including NMPC, whether it's NLNG, whether it's FDI when they start coming, whether it's FPI, do you know that all our FX sources are electronic? Right? Largely electronic. On our own as a country, we'll convert it into physical cash by importing dollars into Nigeria, and we give it to BDCs and we give it to banks. So we're wondering, so one of our recommendations is from the fiscal side, why don't you digitize this market? And you can set, the CBN can set a threshold, $500, $1,000 that you can buy in cash. Anything more than that, you can't do in cash. Bismarck was saying during his presentation, and we've observed that, yeah? So you share FARC, and there's an impact in the forex market. If you digitize it, people will be careful. And having said that, we've been speaking to exporters, and they said to us, even they can bring their proceed inside Nigeria. They also externalize it. You know why? You sell today and you have $10 million. You bring it in, it has to be treated with CBN rates of, let's say, 850. When you need that money to buy inputs and equipment, you can't find from the official market. You now go, who sells their dollar at 850 to go and buy at 13? You will keep it abroad. So while I agree with what my brother said, DG budget, while interest rates, negative real interest rates is an issue, I think for me, it's a very small issue. One, because the Nigerian economy is not a credit economy. There are no mortgages, credit cards, that you will now change your behavior when the interest goes up. And when the interest rate goes up, that's not even what I get when I save my money, right? Whoever is going to save is saving already. Who will not save will not save. While we may not be able to attract a lot of FDI in the meantime, we need to be able to have convergence in those two markets. Some of our recommendations to be able to do that is expand the official market. Why is it that it's only the central bank and the banks that are in the official market? Why don't you bring in BDCs? Why don't you bring in these apps? These technology app people. Bring them to the official market and then regulate. And Bismarck spoke about that. Let's have clear rules even for price determination. Today, with $5,000, I can move Nigeria's exchange rate in the parallel markets. Who does that? So when you have legitimate participants within the purview of the CBN for regulation, then we can now impose, including taxes, in the unofficial market. But you can't do that now. Otherwise, you'll be punishing people for they can't find it in the official market. Why are you not pushing them in the other market? So we think that once you're able to do all this combination of effect, and someone asked me, how would you control the apps? What if they don't comply with your rules? I say exactly one of the easiest things to do. because I've done that before in a different, issue. You write only 2 letters. Of course, you need to enact the law, and we have a draft for it. You enact the law that says anything to do with FX in Nigeria must be done based on rules set by the CBN within the official market. So, if you refuse to comply, whether you are a US company or in China with an app, I write 2 letters, one to Google, the other one to Apple. It takes those guys between 24 hours to 48 hours. They will remove you first before they ask you to explain, because they know what it means to continue to host you on their platform when you are violating laws, particularly when it comes to FX. It's not only a revenue matter or regulatory matter, it's also a terrorism matter. So the issues we have, why they may look complex, we think that the solutions are not as complex. But we just need to be intentional and then make those positive reforms gradually, but do them incrementally. Don't do 1 step forward and 3 backward, and then we are confused again, and then we come back. And clarity is very important. Just communicate what you want to do. Because the way I see it is that even if your situation is so bad and you communicate it, it's still better than if you don't communicate. When you don't communicate, people would assume worst case scenario and they will factor into their behaviors. So how bad can it be if you just communicate your bad situation? And then if you communicate the bad situation and you say, here's my plan to get out of it, and those plans are credible, then people then factor in to say, going forward, maybe things will be better. So overall, we think that it's actually an opportunity for us to work together, monetary, fiscal policy, and trade policies as well. We're speaking to customs, we're speaking to even the verification portal, price verification that the CBN introduced. Manufacturers are saying to us that this thing is adding between 3 to 4 weeks to their ability to even clear anything. So a situation that was already terrible before, we just complicated it. And price determination about, you imported something, you said it's 10 naira instead of 20 naira. It's not the business of central bank to say that the price has been properly declared. What many countries would do, and what we should be doing in Nigeria, is create the linkage between custom and FRS, and that problem disappears. If it doesn't disappear, you know, if I import these phones into Nigeria, a rational person wants to underdeclare so they can underpay duties, isn't it? And that's what the CBN is concerned about. But no problem. Let them underdeclare that this phone is only $200. By the time you file your returns with the FRS, that's the amount you can deduct as the cost of buying the phone. Common sense will tell you that the amount you will lose by underdeclaring this to the FRS is far more than what you save by underdeclaring to custom. That system just self-corrects itself, and you don't need any layers of additional bureaucracy. So, I want to also end on a positive note. I do think that going forward with these reforms, working together, we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to each one of my panelists. I don't know about everyone in the room, but I did soak a lot of insightful nuggets. I'm going to throw it open to the floor now. I do have some questions from the online audience, but I'll start with those I'm seeing right now. So if we can have a mic. Okay, please, can we start with the lady? Yes. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to count myself opportune and lucky to be at the session today. My name is Rafiat Unitiri, the Acting Managing Director of FIC Professional Networks, a financial inclusion outfit. My questions are actually in 2 folds. One to the DG and one to Taiwo Oyedele. Whilst the DG was talking about the initiatives that government has brought up with the agricultural sector, At the last Economic Summit Group, I was privy to listen to the Minister of Agriculture, and he was so passionate about telling the audience the reason why the anchor borrowing failed, that what they found that they had was portfolio farmers who did not utilize the funds very well. My question is, DG, what what method is government going to apply for the collaborators they're considering for the initiative, so that we don't end up with the portfolio farmers? That's my question for the DG. And also for our tax guru, you mentioned about the recommendation of your policies to the federal government about the revenues that are actually the self-inflicted for people, that's the informal sector, right? That revenues they generate. The burden really is on these the NURT, the national road transporters. Thank you very much. Road transporters. The burden, that's why it cascades down to the nano and whatever. Because even for a keke marwa, there's an amount that they pay daily to them. And you're saying it's actually going to be eradicated. It's endemic in those patrons, right? How? What modus operandi are you going to put in place to back up your recommendations to the federal government? Because I tell you, it might get worse if you're trying to do anything drastic. For me, my own solution really is there are better ways of generating revenue. Sit down with the NRU people. If you are going, you collect the money for us. We have government. Collect the money because they respect them. If you want to use force, you might not get what you want. Sit down with them on a sharing formula. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take questions from 4 more people before my panelists would answer. This is difficult for me. Okay. I see.
Thank you. I just want to make a brief comment, which was triggered by some of the remarks of the director, Dr. Akabweze, with regard to the area of the budget. I feel that unless there is a proper realignment of monetary and fiscal policies, we'll be going nowhere. No matter how brilliant the CBN governor is, if the fiscal area is a bit reckless and not properly, and doesn't align with the objectives of the monetary policies, it will not work. I'm not talking of, because you made a remark that sort of reducing the budget in a way that will be cutting your nose to spite your face, that it will make no impact. What I have in mind is that, okay, for instance, in the issue of, in the bureaucracy, Orose did some work sometime about the need to streamline the operations of some of the ministerial departments and ministries and so on. It has not seen the light of day till today. These are the type of things I think a reformist government should try to look at. Because when you reduce some of the structures, you reduce the need to have ministers and all those paraphernalia. I know that some of these things even if we allow that, but those other paraphernalia, special assistants, because each of these positions have things attached to them. They have to have vehicles, they have houses, and So I believe that unless the fiscal recklessness is curbed, it will be difficult for us to have a proper sort of alignment with the monetary policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Please, can you give the mic to him, and then I'm going to shift to this side of the room.
Thank you. My name is African Farmer Mogaji. Chinwe did ask Mr. Ben, or Dr. Ben, about the budget for agriculture. I'm past chairman LCCI Agri Group. Now, when we're talking about agriculture, we focus more on what government wants to spend money on. One of the reasons why we cannot export and we are not competitive is the plant quarantine, which is responsible for the quality that moves out. Those are the parastatals that the budget should be funded, not projects. So if we cannot move products out, the National Seed Council, the quarantine also again, which is, I'm sure you know that, I don't know if you know that Nigeria has a variety of maize, stellar maize, GMO maize, GMO cowpea, which is beans. If anything goes wrong, and I'm not against GMOs, if anything goes wrong, we cannot deal with it as a country currently. If there's a disease outbreak, we cannot deal with it as a country. These are the parastatals that the budget should fund. The government is talking around 500,000 hectares of land to be cleared. Let me do the analysis briefly. It's dead on arrival. Hectares, a bulldozer, 300 horsepower, will clear 1 per day. Now, the bulldozers can only work for 5 months in the year. That's about 30 days. 31 days. That's about 155 days. That means it will take 3.5 years effectively to be able to clear that 500,000 hectares. Even if they commit 500,000 hectares to just corn, they will give about 6 tons per hectare, which is about 83,000 tons. One company in producing livestock feed uses about 90,000 tons. To clear all those land will take conservatively about 300 billion. Government needs to stop funding projects clearing land for private sector. Government needs to fund the parastatal so that the private sector can thrive. How do we get these messages across? What we're seeing now is that the data government uses to plan for agriculture is grossly inadequate. How can we do that? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this way, please. The lady.
Thank you very much. The struggle continues. I see the old faces there. I am Miss Yemisi Ransom Kuti, retired from the private sector, the founder of the Nigerian Network of NGOs, and co-founder of Lagos Island Connect. My question and worry is about implementation, because whatever budgets we've had over the years, implementation has been less than stellar. How can we, I was happy to hear my brother Taiwo talking about a platform for monitoring the, is it 8 trillion savings from something? How can the budget office, Mr. Kabwisi, set up a robust stakeholder engagement, feedback mechanisms to monitor the implementation of these budgets, so that citizens, and whether it's private sector or whoever, can see clearly the process of implementation. We've just seen the humanitarian affairs debacle. This would be avoided if we had a very transparent process that is both electronic and physical, so that citizens can engage at the local level, at different levels, both for the development of the budget itself, which is what happens in other countries, that citizens are engaged in the development of the budget itself, but in the implementation, how do we have that robust platform? And secondly, to the issue of my sister there just mentioned the NURTW. There's another element of tax collectors, the mafias that we call area boys. And they're closing down businesses. I'm very aware of this in some areas. How do you find a way of making these young people less problematic for the society? Rehabilitating them. Some of them are on drugs. How do we ensure that we have places to take them to rehabilitate them to become more productive citizens? Give them jobs. We need to rid the society of these elements if we want to make anything work in Nigeria. And we need to do it in a very humanitarian way. We want to make sure that these young people become useful citizens, not just lock them up and throw away the keys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to let them answer this first set, and then I'll come back one more round. And that is only because the online questions are not sufficient yet. So based on what I've noted, Mr. Ben, you have quite a number of questions. Okay, so I'll start with you and then pass the mic to Taiwo.
Thank you. I'll take the questions concerning agriculture, and then the first, there was what method we are adopting to eliminate portfolio farmers, as the Honorable Minister for Agriculture indicated. As he has said, repeatedly on different fora, okay, it's no longer a question of coming to say, I'm a farmer, I'm going to whatever. You've got to basically identify, where this farming activity is taking place, and it will be something that is verifiable and verified. And recently, I know that the Minister of State for Agriculture was on a nationwide. All those who have already indicated that they're engaged in significant farming, they've been going around trying to actually then locate them where this activity is going on, so they can, generate a register of the real people who are engaged in agriculture, so that government incentives can be more targeted. African Farmer, Mogaji, whose book I've read, made a point. First, he said we should be, improving funding for certain parastatals like the Island Quarantine Service. You will find that indeed that is the case, that funding has improved. But again, they also generate revenues because they charge for their services. So that's part of the the funding that is available to to them. But you challenge the goal of clearing 500,000 hectares. I think perhaps it may be that your engagement in agriculture has been mostly down south, in southern Nigeria. And if that is the case, you will be, excused. Land clearing, the cost of land clearing is not uniform across the country. Up north, where they actually have the vast land for agriculture, the cost of land clearing is way cheaper than the cost down south here. And that's why the national, there used to be National Agri-Land Development Authority, which was closed down a few years back. We revived that because we realized that, especially down south, okay, the cost of land clearing was prohibitive without government support. And so now that was mainly to focus on helping with land clearing, down south here. And the 500,000 is not necessarily virgin, new, whatever. It's basically, and it didn't say all of it will be, funded by government. But that's a target of how much and want to bring, under, cultivation focused on certain, value, chains in agriculture. So I believe that the numbers and the provision that has been made in the budget for that will be adequate. But what you're also then challenging the economics of it. But I'm not sure whether you're suggesting that we shouldn't then increase the acreage of land under cultivation, or I'm not quite sure what the argument is, or is it that they should be targeting a different mix of crops to make it economically viable? Maybe a chance for you to explain better, so I can take that back to the people in the agric area. Chief, you advocated proper realignment of fiscal and monetary policies. Right? Well, that's what we're trying to do. Everywhere, it's normal, globally. There's always some tension. There's always some measure of tension between monetary and fiscal policies, and that needs to be, to be managed. But you referred to what you call, fiscal recklessness. Many ministers, more whatever. Earlier on I talked about the scope to improve the spending discipline. That's all part of it, adjusting all of those. But the truth, sir, is that relative to, the sort of money that we're dealing with, the sort of, levels of the challenge, the amount of service, if you go and look at the Ronsayo report, this was, 11 years ago when they produced the report. They said they were targeting from that whatever savings of under 5 billion naira from it. So even if you multiply that by 20 today and say 100 billion naira, okay, 28.7 trillion naira. 100 billion naira begins to pale into it's not the silver bullet that people make it sound like. The government needs to deal with it. But you heard also about the need to pace reforms. Okay, there are reforms that are going to be less. You'll wonder, why hasn't it been possible to implement the Ronsayo report? The Jonathan administration commissioned it. They had almost 3 years between that and the end of their term in 2015, but they didn't implement it because they were weighing the political costs and the disruptions and the challenges. The Buhari administration came, looked at it. First, it committed itself that it was not going to, retrench workers. Okay, because it believed that it would only exacerbate the socio-political situation when you have, high unemployment, and that retrenching would simply, worsen the situation. Therefore, it figured if it went ahead with implementation, so maybe you will save in terms of a number of chief executives that you will, reduce. But if all you do is take the staff of those agencies that and redistribute them to the other agencies because you're committed not to retrench, then the savings is minimal vis-a-vis the distraction and the political. So they set it aside. The new administration has come now. It's looking at it again, and it's going to take a view somewhat. But the point is, even between that 2012 and by the end of the last administration, we have created many more institutions, and it got to a point where every piece of legislation, almost every piece of legislation that came out of the National Assembly came with, another institution. So these things are not, they're not as that for the people on maybe the fiscal authorities, the office of Minister of Finance, to say, oh no, we can't, whatever. Look, late last night, I got a call. I have a meeting tomorrow to attend because there were about 35 agencies that we kicked out of the budget in this 2024. Many of these people who, I don't even know how they crept into the federal government's budget over the years in the first place. But they've been all over the place, my name has been whatever, there, all over. So tomorrow I have to say, but so these things are not as easy as we think that they are. Okay. My sister Yemisi talked about the need for robust stakeholder engagement, and feedback mechanisms and platforms. The thing is, especially when you sit on this side, and you can tell that my friend Taiwo is sounding differently from how he used to sound. But the point is, there's information, there are things that you now get to know that maybe, when you're out, you don't. When you talk about need for robust, stakeholder engagement platforms, if you go to the website of the Budget Office, we have what we call the iMonitor, which is basically a platform for you to, be the eyes of government for any government project that is being implemented in your area. Go in there, you can take pictures, upload a report for the Budget Office. After a while, people said, oh, well, for that, people will have to go to your website first to whatever. We created what we call the iMac. iMac is an app, and it's available free on Google Play, on whatever, and it's there. You download it on your system. It enables you, capture reports on whatever government projects and that you're not happy with the implementation, whether the contractor or you think there's shoddy work that is being done or the work that's been done is not commensurate with the value of the project, and send to us. There's Nokopoko, which is the public procurement platform. Every agency uploads their procurement, whatever there. You look at it. We have the Treasury Portal, where every payment by any agency of the federal government above 5 million naira is uploaded to it, including who is paid. That's, again, you can go there and this is so, but I'm not sure that people who really engage, like people like Budget. You've got Tracker. I'm sure you've heard that's a private initiative apart from the government ones, which they use and monitor and track all of they focused on the constituency projects for this, but there are all of these platforms. So I don't agree that they're not enough. And then things like NURTW, area boys and whatever, these are really matters for the subnational government, not the federal government, to deal with. These are municipal level, issues, and their incidence varies, across the country. There are some parts of the country that you go to and say area boys, they don't know what you're talking about. So, but the law enforcement, like police, is a federal whatever. But dealing with those challenges, these are not federal government issues.
Okay, I think there's a mic there. Yes.
Thank you very much. So, my brother is right. He said I'm sounding a little bit different. And that's intentional, partly because if I become very combative, how would I get my reforms done? So imagine just being the National Assembly today and tomorrow is here, I have a bill to pass. So, and to be honest, if you are looking for outcomes, what's the point? If you're already at the table to try and fix the problem, why then complain publicly? I think on the two issues, and they are connected. One is to do with informal taxes, with the likes of NURTW. So the first point I would like to make is from the Presidential Committee's point of view, and based on data, we think that there's a wrong understanding. I don't know whether understanding is the right word to use in Nigeria, particularly by people in government, including at the highest levels, say governors, thinking that their money is in the informal sector. It's not supported by any data. We think that about 99% of the formal sector should be officially, legally exempted from all taxes, so they don't have to worry, right? If you tax just the 1%, based on different data in Nigeria, that's close to 4 million, the top 1%. That's more than the people who are paying taxes today in Nigeria. Number two is, we also have this wrong behavior that because we think our revenue from taxes is not enough, we introduce another one. If it's not enough, we introduce another one. At the end of the 9th National Assembly, there were over 250 something bills at different stages that we went through. And over 40 of them are establishing one thing or the other and introducing new taxes. Just imagine, we already have a complex process as it is, and then we have over 40 to add on top of it. So the first thing we are trying to do is harmonize the taxes. The target we have is to reduce all taxes and levies by federal, state, and local government to a single digit combined. South Africa made in 2022 about 26 trillion naira equivalent from personal income tax alone. All the taxes collected in Nigeria, 774 local governments, 36 states, FCT, federal government, including FRS and Customs Service, is not up to that amount. So it is not the number of taxes that will make you collect more revenue. So can we get to a point where the informal sector guys pay only one tax if they have to pay, and they pay it electronically? Star something hash, 300 naira. The receipt comes on your phone. So, and Mr. Ben Akabueze is right. A lot of these issues actually happen at the local government and state level. And that is why we've been going around. Those who are following our activities, see, we are currently engaging extensively with the governors. When we are done with them, we go to local government because we need to work together. This is a national crisis, the way I would define it. So we want to harmonize it and amend different laws, including the Constitution. We already had a retreat with the Senate, and we said to them, we are we're going to propose amendment to the Constitution so that we can solve this problem once and for all. So if you digitize, you harmonize, and you keep it simple so that small businesses pay only one if they have to pay, what would then happen, the way we see it, is that these NURTW and some of the area boys, we think they're also largely victims themselves, right? We don't like what they're doing, but think about it. If the society were to be working properly, they won't be there. They're being used. When they collect those monies, the bulk of it don't even end up in their pocket. It goes to their principals that you don't see on the streets, right? So our approach to this is, can we start with a win-win situation? And Madam already pointed towards the direction we are thinking as well. So there's a cooperative society structure. There's the association structure. There's almost nothing you are doing, particularly in our environment, that there's no association for it. Tailors have association. Vulcanizers have association. Everybody has association, right? That solves the problem. It makes it easy because I don't need to chase 1 million people. I just need to go to the associations. What government then needs to do is to empower those associations so that there's an economic value for them to work with the government. I was in one of my visits to Rwanda. You know, every time I get there, I get fascinated by how clean Kigali is. So in one of my commutes, I was talking to the driver that was taking me around. I said, how do you manage? I saw people cleaning the streets and they were happy doing it. So the guy said they use cooperative society structure to do it. Here's how it works. So your cooperative society is allocated an area where you must clean. The cooperative society is paid the amount. The society shares it to the cleaners. Every time that you wake up as a cleaner, you know not only is it that your livelihood depends on cleaning well, the livelihood of other 50, for example, these are people you know. Other 50 families are depending on you to clean well, because my failure alone means that my cooperative society will lose that job. So they cannot afford not to do the work. So it's commercial for the association, it benefits their members, it benefits the government. How can we do something like that here? For example, NURTW will say all drivers, if you're a transporter, you pay only one tax. That one tax, you can break it now because they don't save money, like maybe you pay it monthly, whatever frequency of payment, but it's only one tax you're paying, you pay frequently. Their association, NURTW, you'll be the one that will be the collecting agent for the government. You will get a commission for collecting it of X%. So what then happens is you align their interests with the interests of the government. And then on top of that, you find commercial value in it for them, so that they are even getting contract that they can execute as a society. One of the things you can do instead of sharing money around, for example, if you have cooperative society and you say to them, I'm giving you money, or we are buying you a tractor, or whatever it is, my brother there knows these things better than me, that farmers need, and you give it to the cooperative society. You need loan for you to do small business, you give to cooperative society. It's the cooperative society that will give it to you. You will not collect money from cooperative society and go and marry 4 wives. You know that cooperative society setting is you can't default. They monitor it themselves, because now it is our money, not the money of government. Because every time you read the news, somebody has taken 1 billion, another person take 10 billion. The day they give you farmer money, it's like your own share of it has come. People have no intention of paying those things back, and that's why the CBN couldn't recover them. So we think that we can align. We need to be realistic. We'll not just bounce everybody and everything will be fine. If we get to a point where we outlaw cash payment for those taxes, we harmonize them. Even the state actors collect illegal taxes, and sometimes they collect legal taxes illegally. Deal with all of those things. So the guys on the street, treat them, train them, give them uniform, pay them nice salaries. They're the one that will ask you and say, can I see your phone to confirm that you have paid? The person is still earning a living, right? And now they are doing it professionally. From there, maybe they will get some skills and leave the road on their own without you asking them to leave. It might be a journey of another 3-4 years, but that journey has to start and it has to be sustained.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. So we don't have time anymore, but I have pleaded that I take the last round of questions, and they are heavily from the online attendees. So Bismarck, I have a few questions for you. One is, what is the macro impact of operations of Dangote refinery in the near term? That's number one. The second one is, while subsidy has been removed officially, we are aware that there's still some form of subsidy being paid. Where is the provision for this in the budget? So those two, your name was placed here. Sorry, for those two. Taiwo, Mr. Bismarck recommended tax increase, but there is no provision for reduction in the cost of governance in the budget. How do you expect citizens to comply with increase in taxes? I don't know if I want to read all of this. Well, when politicians are still going home with jumbo bags. That is a question for Taiwo. Another question for Taiwo. FX availability can be improved by encouraging more international investments. investors, to invest in our capital market. Capital gains is a major deterrent to this. What is the government doing about this? That is about removing capital gains tax from equities transactions. So we don't have sufficient time. So the responses, they've pleaded with me that the responses should be succinct.
Okay. Let me take Dangote Refinery. Dangote Refinery and Petrochemical Complex is I think, $21 to $22 billion investment. To put it in context, total gross fixed investment in Nigeria is about $95 billion. So this is about almost 22 to 23% of gross fixed investment in Nigeria. What does it do? It takes crude from escravos or what have you by tanker. It's processed by fractional distillation, and for now we would have diesel, we'll have dual purpose kerosene, and then before we now go to PMS. The crude that is bought at the crude international price in dollars. It is processed and is sold to the Nigerian market and the West African market. Okay, it's 650,000 barrels a day capacity, but it's going to be doing about 350,000 barrels. It's a major investment. What does it do? It guarantees you adequate supply, but does not guarantee you a reduction in price. The effective price of petrol is not just the nominal price, but also the downtime you waste if there's a queue and because of irregular supply. I think that if it buys in dollars, processes, and then sells to the Nigerian government in dollars, and the Nigerian government sells to you in naira, that's one model. The other model is that he can sell all of these products in West Africa and get dollars as well. So I think that's number one thing. Number two is that the fact that I've heard a lot of saying that once you fix the refineries, Nigeria's problems are solved. Most of the best performing economies in Africa who are doing better than us do not have refineries. So if the ownership of a refinery that works is the same thing as having an economy that works and an economy that is performing, that equation doesn't exist. So you can still have working refineries and have a bad economy, because bad economies are products of bad management. So I think that's the first thing. But it helps. It's necessary for Nigeria because Nigeria has a lot of crude, has a lot of gas, that Nigeria actually refines its oil and sells refined products not only domestically but internationally. That is where it comes in. And I think we know that the Dangote refinery is going to be listed on the exchange sometime, maybe in another year or two. It has the capacity of actually increasing market capitalization significantly, right? Just NNPC alone limited and Dangote refinery has the capacity of bringing market capitalization as a percentage of GDP much higher, almost to 100%. So that helps. And also, there's fertilizer, which is now about 4 million tons. And just like the Director of Budget said, the fact that we've seen an increase in fertilizer production without a corresponding increase in agricultural output means that either we are misapplying the fertilizers, or the fertilizers are finding their way outside Nigeria, and again, part of the exchange rate implications, that it's being smuggled out, or being used, ironically, for making explosives which are being used by terrorists. So I think that the refinery will give us products, it will initially bring increased supply of diesel and then probably bring down the price of diesel somewhat. But it is not going to bring down the price of PMS. 2, the fact that you were actually giving your crude now to Trafigura or Vitol or Glencore to go and refine for you and bring it back to the country means that there's no foreign exchange impact, because the dollars you would have earned by exporting the crude, right, is what is being used to refine and bring back. So it's the transportation cost of crude to Rotterdam and bringing it back. Then that's the saving there. Secondly, the whole template for subsidies and all of that includes so many loopholes for exploitation. And like they say, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. The people that put this around are not likely to fold, right? Just like we're told about the East-West Road. The guys who are supposed to be in charge of it are the ones that are going to lose out. So we have to deal with internal contradictions and conflicts of interest internally first. But at the same time, because gradually we're moving in that direction, we will see some progress in that respect. But the crisis of false expectation is worse than, which is what I think we should correct very quickly, because people just think that this is a silver bullet that solves all problems. I think generally speaking, that is one thing. The other thing about the exchange rate mechanism in the country is that just keep it simple. All these apps and taxes and all of that. I think, you see, there are countries all over Africa where these things, where there are less regulation, less restrictions, and people get by, right? And they get by, and it doesn't impede productivity. So my plea is that, yes, we may try to sound as politically correct as we want to be, but the reality, at the end of the day, the markets are smarter than everybody, and the people in the end will be smarter than everybody. So we might as well put everything on the table, and the price of a currency, right? The fact that you have a strong economy doesn't mean that you'll have a strong currency. The South African rand has gone all the way from 9.11 all the way to 19 rand to $1. The Ghanaian cedi went all the way from God knows what. When we redenominated the cedi, it was $1 new to $1 new cedi. Now that has gone all the way to 11, 12, or whatever. Then after they did the IMF program, it's now, and they freed up some money, probably come down to about 10 or 9. So the value of a currency helps to give you some kind of stability, but the system that allows it to fluctuate and make people believe that it fluctuates and it's not the end of the world is the most important thing, the belief and the people have in the system. When there was Brexit, before Brexit, it was $1.58 to a pound. Then it went, when Liz Truss was a prime minister, it went all the way to £1 was $1. And quite frankly, now it's gone back to about 126, 127. So, and Britain remains the same Britain as you knew it, except that there's not the Queen anymore. The Queen is gone, and the King is there. So I want us to understand that these economic cycles of boom, slow down, bust, back to boom are natural phenomena, and therefore we shouldn't think that a downturn is the end of the world. Neither should we think that an upturn means that we have prosperity forever. Thank you.
Thank you. So very quickly, I don't think that Bismarck was asking us to increase taxes. So the person who asked the question probably didn't hear him well. And he said to me, I know you won't recommend that we should increase taxes. So people sometimes misunderstand increasing revenue to mean increasing taxes. But then I think the point the person was really asking is no reduction in cost in the budget, yet we want to increase taxes. And I think DG budget already addressed this. So I actually think that the problem is not reducing the cost in the budget. We need to spend more. The point is also not even reducing the cost of governance, right? If I say to you that I think that civil servants should get like 2 or 3 times what they are earning today, and then we talk about productivity, right? So that means your recurrent expenditure should actually go up. The conversation is a priority. And sometimes that political leaders come across as insensitive. So if all lawmakers and every elected and appointed officer decide not to take a car from government, they try not to earn even 1 naira from government, we will still be discussing the issues we are discussing. Those amounts will not change the narratives. So which means we have to do that from at least signaling point of view and showing empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you lead. To that extent, I would agree. So from a committee's point of view, we are focusing on the quality of spending and the efficiency of spending so that whatever it is that we spend benefits the economy as much as possible. The second and the last one is about the need for FX availability. And I do agree with Bismarck. To be honest, what we are recommending is simple. You wouldn't go to the UK or most countries and go and buy $1 million in cash and just go and keep it and nothing will happen. I don't see any country where they do that. You know, if you try and put sanity around what you do, you know, bring everybody on board, that gives visibility and you're able to control and regulate. So this person is saying, for us to attract foreign portfolio investors into Nigeria, why don't we remove the capital gains tax that we introduced on shares in the stock market? So number one, I'll say that that's not affecting FPI at all. So there is nobody who wants to invest in your capital market, and they say they will not invest again because there's capital gains tax. If you don't charge them the capital gains tax here, they will pay it when they go back home. We have this global thing we call Pillar 1, Pillar 2 without sounding technical. It simply means whatever tax you don't pay in country A, I'll collect it from you, because multinationals in particular and big-time investors were gaming the system, the international system. So if we are going to even advocate for removal of capital gains tax on the stock market, it will not be because of foreign investors. It will be because of domestic investors. But in any case, they're used to paying taxes. If they invest in the UK, they'll pay tax. They invest in the US, they'll pay tax. They invest in Germany, and they're still investing. If they invest in China, they'll pay tax. They invest in India, they will pay. They're investing in India despite the taxes. So once we have taxes that make sense, they are transparent, and the philosophy that we're trying to establish for our country is don't tax investment. Tax the returns on investment. Capital gain is returns on investment. If you can protect the capital, don't tax capital. Don't tax production. Don't tax poverty. And Mr. President said, don't tax seed. We can tax the fruit. We are now trying to translate those philosophies into letters, spirit, and letters of the law, and then find the way to implement as quickly as possible and transmit those policies into reality of what people find on the ground in their day-to-day lives when they do businesses or live as individuals or when they run big organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now, in 30 seconds, each of my speakers will just give a closing remark, 30 seconds per speaker.
Well, first there's a question about, which was directed to Bismarck, which I think he stepped correctly. You say, where is the provision for budget subsidy in the budget? There's no such provision because the government's policy remains that it's moving subsidy. So what's happening now is between the waivers or suspensions of certain axes or components of the pricing in the pricing template, and whatever residual sources, NMPC, which is the principal supplier to the market, and it's a company owned by all of us, it will probably show up as a loss on petrol trading in their books, if you know, to the extent that there is. But in closing, I just want to leave us with some. There have been all kinds of commentaries. I haven't heard a whole lot of it today. Adverse commentaries about the 2024 budget, whether it's realistic. First, people have said it's too small. I think we've explained that we don't deny that it's too small, but that's what we can afford now. And even in that, you still have 9 trillion naira of deficit that you need to to finance. People have questioned the realism of the revenue projection, 19.6 trillion. Well, we think that it is feasible. And by the way, that hasn't even factored a whole lot of the initiatives coming out of Taiwo's committee. But this year, as of November, okay, this year's, for 2023 revenue projection was 11 trillion. By November, we're doing 10.1 trillion, just 0.2% above the pro rata, target for that period. So we know what we're doing in terms of, there's been a focus more over the years on trying to deal with the revenue problem. I think that we're now beginning to see, the results. So, in terms of the budget, people have questioned the GDP projection. I think that we've heard today that it is something that is doable, and we've also heard that the inflation rate is not way out of the ballpark in terms of the analysis, that with the exchange rate assumption of 800 naira. Okay, we believe that, and again, Bismarck's presentation, when he showed the PPP exchange rate of about 853. If between now and the 800 is a projected average for the year, okay, we think that as the policies that are aimed to improve supply of foreign exchange, to restore confidence to the foreign exchange market, to improve efficiency in terms of the work begin to take root, we will see naira begin to recover strength towards the power parity rate. One of the evidences that our exchange rate, that the naira is undervalued now. We talk about inflation. Food inflation is a critical component of that. Part of because a lot of our food, Nigeria is feeding a significant portion of the sub-region. Our grains go to the north. You see it, trucks, hundreds of trailers of trucks carrying our food, across the borders, all as far as Sudan and all of that, feeding all of those people. You go there, sitting here in Lagos wearing our fancy clothing and whatever. The Chinese folks are intermediating that trade, because given our current exchange rate, our food has become so much cheaper than food even in these other African countries. So we think that generally we are on the right path, as stated. Many of our for the last 3-4 years, oil revenues non-oil revenues have exceeded the budget targets. It's oil revenues that have let us down. But this year, given the reforms in that sector, by November, oil revenues are 6.6% above budget. And so when with that, we think that, basically on non-oil taxes, VAT, CIT, they're all whatever. Customs is the one that has remained below that we need to fix. And I believe that the implementation of the single window, or whatever they call e-customs, either way, automating this and reducing discretion will get us, to fix the problem there. Thank you.
Okay, I think my comment will pretty much be around the fact that it's a fact that we have challenges and we shouldn't deny them, but also just to encourage everyone to also say, also don't miss out on the things that are working, so you don't miss out on the opportunities. And please do continue to engage with us and give us feedback, those practical things that you walk through. Help us to articulate the policies properly and ensure that they are evidence-based, data-driven, so they can address the problems effectively when we do introduce them. I would kindly invite you to please follow us. So we have a website, fiscalreforms.ng. Then on social media, if you like social media, just remember Fiscal Reforms NG. You find us on Twitter, now called X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and we have dedicated email and WhatsApp accounts. The email is fiscalreforms is enquiries at fiscalreforms.ng. So just remember fiscalreforms.ng and you will not be wrong. The more you engage with us, the more our decisions are inclusive, the more they address the issues. We have significant amounts of reforms we're working on for 2024. Like, we are rewriting all the major tax laws. We're not amending them, we are rewriting them. And we actually have the draft as we speak. So we'll expose them. Please engage with us to discuss them so that we can make progress quickly, given that there's a sense of urgency. We've lost a lot of time. We miss opportunities, whether you're talking about AFCFTA. We have plans to make Nigeria an attractive location for almost everything. Headquarter location, global process outsourcing, digital innovation, even creative. Look at our creative sector. Why can't we be the center, not only for Africa, one of the centers for the world? We're speaking to the creative guys just to bring camera to do videoing in Nigeria, to do shooting. Somebody says pay duty. Meanwhile, you only need the camera for just 2 weeks. So Ghana says bring it here. We apply common sense here. It's temporary. You go and shoot it in Ghana instead of Nigeria. So some of those issues are things we've identified and we want to remove them so that it can be a lot easier for us to just earn a living, do business, grow the economy. If government can get out of the way, then progress is almost guaranteed. Thank you.
For me, I think that the first half of 2024, that is between now and July, will be to actually take some hard decisions. So reform announcements, policy announcements, then the heavy lifting, institutional reform, where the institutions that actually implement these reforms are reorganized and equipped. Then the results begin to see the results and the impact of these things at the end of 2024 into early 2025. I think that way things will be, there'll be a smooth transition of moderation of inflation, is gradual improvement in output growth, and then the investors, both domestically and internationally, will be looking at the market to say, okay, these guys or this country is becoming a serious place to do business. There will be hiccups along the way, but like I said, the sensitivity of the policymakers, the regulators, to negative developments has shown that they are willing to make some changes, right? Not all the changes, but are willing to make some changes. So we would say that there's some flickers of hope at the end of this dark tunnel, and but that the longest journey in the world starts with the first step. And so directionally, things will move in the right trajectory, but impact will be felt, and when it comes, it's going to come in a big way later in the year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you everyone for giving us your undivided attention. For me, I would say, or from my vantage point, it's still a blend of optimism and caution. And so cost optimization, risk optimization, innovative thinking should remain at the front burner of everyone's gas cooker here. Thank you so much to each of my panelists for an amazing and insightful session.
Thank you so much. Once again, please, let's put our hands together for our panelists. Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. SARS and Ma, thank you so much. We'll have little presentations to give to our panelists. Please, let's have one by one. Just to mention that the advert that our brother Taiwo Oyedele gave on how to follow the handles and publicity about the website, we will give you an invoice from the chamber, and we have over close to 300 participants online. You can imagine what that means. Thank you so much. Yes, the first. I will crave the indulgence of Mr. President, Chairman of Council, here at SCCI, to please do us the honor of making these presentations to our panelists. The first on the list, can I have? Okay, yes. Always the first among, let's put our hands together for Mr. Bismarck Rewani, CEO, Financial Derivatives. Yes, it's okay here. Yes, here, yes. I think it's okay here, sir. Okay, yeah. Yes, Mr. Bismarck. Stay back to your seat, sir. We're going to have... Next is Mr. Ben Akabwese. So somebody needs to give this to them. Please, can we have the screen put off for now? I think it's affecting our camera right here. Thank you. Next, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Right? Next, last but not the least, and you know, a woman like a man, Miss Chinwe Edwin. All right, so Miss Chinwe, just stay. Let's have Mr. Ben Akabese join the president and the deputy. Yes, Mr. Bismarck, please, for a photo ops, and Mr. Taiwo. Yes, photos. Okay, can we just come down? Yes, to where the Madam DG is. Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir. Just a step forward. Yes, are we good? Are we good? All right, thank you so much. Let's put our hands together for our panelists. We're good. Thank you. Yes, sir. So we need to give this in the folders. Please, let's do that with them before they step out. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. For a closing remark, for the closing remarks of this occasion, let's put our hands together for the Director General SCCI, Dr. Mrs. Chinyere Almona, FCA.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a wonderful session. Please put your hands together for yourselves. Thanks for your patience. On behalf of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I want to thank you for being here today at our 2024 Economic Outlook and Budget Analysis. The theme for today has been building economic resilience in 2024 and looking at the strategies for a sustainable future. First of all, I want to thank my president, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, FCA, for giving us the platform to have this session today. I want to thank our distinguished speakers who have done us proud today. The keynote speaker, Mr. Bismarck Rewani, the moderator, Ms. Chinwe Egwim, Mr. Ben Akabweze, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. We want to say thank you very much for generously sharing your experiences, your expertise, your perspective, and your thought-provoking views on how we move forward and create stability and resilience in the Nigerian economy. I want to thank our sponsors, Linkage Assurance PLC, for their support in making this event possible. They have really promoted our ability to actually have this conversation, and so we say thank you to them. I want to thank our audience. I want to thank all of you. Please put your hands together for yourselves. I also want to thank those online. I think at the highest count, we had almost 300 people online. So please put your hands together for them. I want to thank you all for the questions, for your participation, for your engaging, just sharing your thoughts. Even those who asked questions shared their thoughts. And so I want to say thank you for keeping this environment vibrant and keeping the conversation going. Last but certainly not the least, I want to thank my staff. They are the organizing and the executing committee. Please put your hands together for my staff. They work diligently behind the scene to ensure a seamless execution of this event, and I really do appreciate their dedication. As we leave today, let us carry forward some of the optimism we have shared today. I think for the first time, usually when I hear the economists speak, I go away feeling very heavy and saying that, oh gosh, everything is over. But today there was a good balance between, please put your hands together for our speakers. I'm actually leaving here today energized and positive that a change is possible and we can do this, and that our nation is not doomed. So I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. Before you leave, just in case there's anyone here who is not a member of the chamber, this is January, this is the beginning of the year, and a good time to engage with the chamber. So please speak to us at the back so we can help you and facilitate your membership of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Once again, thank you for being part of the 2024 Economic Outlook and Budget Analysis session. I hope to see you all again when we'll call you together for the mid-year review. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam DG. Thank you, everyone. Just to mention that we have members of the press at the back. They would like to speak with Mr. Ben Akabweze and Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. So, Mr. Ben, you give me like 2 minutes of your time with the Nigerian media. Mr. Taiwo, you also give me 2 minutes of your time with the press. Just 2 minutes. And Mr. Ben. So I take Mr. Ben first. After Mr. Ben, I'll bring Mr. Taiwo. So